Oh, yeah, sorry. I wondering if I can use. No. Make it there. Then tonight we're going to Georgia together. Yes.
They're not going to the same conference.
No, no, I'm just going. Same place in us.
Like by chance.
Just by chance. No, we were going the same weekend. So. Curious happenstance.
No one else knows.
That's a Chinese coffee of German to wine.
It's nice.
I like the feel, the touch and feel. Actually, because it's German, it's not Chinese. Cases.
But then you have vibration. Right?
No, like it vibrates.
It's like before years ago.
No, it's due to the
Power.
yeah, of course. But if you can feel it from outside, touch it here, you get it. You move it and you feel like, oh, this is physics in action.
But this is also how it is.
That's what I like. And it's pretty sturdy, so basically can play it has no.
And this is just a keyboard. Yeah.
Yes, it's just a keyboard that's designed for this particular tablet and so on. Oh, what? Okay. There's no.
No brown bag and Friday.
What are we gonna do?
We go on holiday. We come back, let's go on holiday.
Actually, I'm testing next Friday anyway, so everything's cool. Yeah, I'm sort of sorry to miss the open day. I like to go to those.
See? Sí.
Should see and just hit the mute button.
Dan. Hanno le nuove prima.
Perché fa un solo così, preferisci fare così.
Perché spiegami il tuo account Sigma per ordinare l'anticorpo. Ok. Le piccole. Me le porto dopo perché anche vorrei fare il tabulario a controllare. Sì, grazie. È già aggiornato il carosello. Ciao.
Just give that test agency.
Yeah, violating the cardinal rule of being near the edge. Thanks everybody for coming today. Got a little news here, just to note that there'll be no brown bag next week. There's an open day for prospective master's students going on, so if you see some young, hopeful people in the hallways, they'll be happy and excited. Okay, today I am going to talk about my project in the context of Giorgio Corricelli's Transfer Learning ERC project, and then I'm going to talk about a little bit of the technique that we're using for it and where I am right now. It's not a complete thing, my answers to the imagination, but hopefully we'll have something to talk about. Okay, imagine that you go into a casino and you sit down at a slot machine, put your money in, pull the lever, the music plays, the wheels turn, and you lose. Okay, you feel bad, but there's nothing you can do about it. It's just nature, it's probability. Doesn't matter, but you feel bad. We call this disappointment. A little lady comes in and sits at the machine next to you, puts her money in, pulls the lever, music plays, wheels turn, and she wins. Now you can imagine an alternative reality in which you chose to sit at that other machine and you won. Now, it doesn't change the fact that you feel bad because you still lost, but you can imagine this other choice that we made. This is your agency. So now you share a little bit of the fault. Say. This emotion, you feel bad, but you could have done something differently in a different This we call, so nature, probability, corresponds to disappointment. Agency and choice, stuff really bad, corresponds to regret. And both of these actions can drive learning in animals and humans. Showing a lot of literature. And what we're wondering is, can these not only drive learning in the same task, but can they transfer to a different task? To look at that, you have to look at a bunch of choices in a row. And so you can't just compare individual choices, trial by trial basis, or reaction time, or something like that. You have to look at a whole series of choices, and that's where it gets a little tricky. And that's where we start employing computational modeling. So what we have is something that's happening mentally, a cognitive process that we call learning. And that drives and generates choices. And we can observe those as human behavior. But what we can't do is just simply go backwards and say, well, we know the choices, so now we know the cognitive process. But what we can do is build a behavioral model to try to get some idea of the cognitive process. I'm going to give you an example that is not the experiment that I'm doing, but it's a simple idea of an experiment. You have two squares, blue and a red. And the blue has, if you choose blue, you have a 70% chance of winning a €1 reward. If you choose the red, you have a 10% chance of winning a €1 reward. So each of them you can win sometimes. Your goal, or our human's goal, is to pick the one that will win the most often. So he chooses red and he gets €1, which is a little unlikely, but it happens. Chooses blue, he loses. He wins nothing. Again, unlikely, but it happens. But then he chooses blue, wins. That's pretty likely. Blue wins, likely. Red loses, also likely. What could be happening with him? So this flowchart shows what could be informing his decisions as he learns. So we start out with the value prediction. At the very beginning, he maybe doesn't have any idea. But let's say after the first trial, he now has this idea of what each of these squares is worth. Not a percentage, not a probability, but the actual value of the squares. Then he makes a choice which is based on the value that he has in mind. And then he gets a reward, the outcome. That reward then informs how he has the value. So if it's the same as the value he thought of before, he makes no change. But if it's different, then he does make a change, and that informs his next choice. I'm going to show you that in a series. Here's briefly just the simple reinforcement learning equation. Don't worry about something I'm explaining right away. Working backwards, we have this orange part here corresponds to the different from prediction. So the chosen outcome, like the result that he got, and the difference between the value that he had placed on that square before. So you see that's some small difference between the value he had in mind and the actual outcome. And that can be positive or negative, of course, because if it was less than he believed, then it would be a positive outcome. If it was more than he believed, it would be negative. Reverse that. Then that's modulated by the learning rate, which is represented by this parameter alpha. The learning rate governs how much importance he puts on the most recent results. So does he think that this most recent thing was really important? Then that's going to be all the way to 1. The learning rate can go from 0 to 1. If it's less important, if he wants to keep in mind more what he had before, then that parameter will stay lower. So that's some percentage of his previous value, and he adds it to the previous value, and he gets this new mental value of the red square that he chose. So you see again that this part here, this is the difference between the expected and the actual outcome. And it corresponds in this flowchart to this, and it updates the value with this learning rate. Okay. So over a series of choices, we see that at the very beginning, it's basically arbitrary. He considers these almost a chance, so 50 cents a piece. He makes a choice, the red choice. Then he gets a result, stimulus, he wins something. It goes through the learning rate, the alpha, into his cognitive state and increases that 0.5, that 50-cent valuation, and bumps it all the way up to 60 cents. He makes another choice, the blue. He's not convinced yet that red is the best, so he chooses a blue. He loses. This is a negative outcome, It updates through the alpha, and 0.5 goes to 0.4. So, and it goes on and on. You see when you wins in the blue, that goes back up, wins, it goes up again, and then he loses in the red, and it goes down to 0.5. Now, over the course of, say, 50 or 100 trials, eventually we would expect him to get all the way to something approximating the actual probability of the blue and red square. We have a 7%. And how fast he gets there is determined by his alpha, or how fast he gets there tells us what his alpha would be. How do we figure that out? How do we figure out what his alpha would be? Well, we have people do, just to the point on this, the alpha then is giving us a clue to the cognitive function. How do we find it? We have people do, say, 100 trials on this, okay? And then we use that model, using that equation that I showed you on the previous screen. We have the computer do it. But we don't have the computer do just 100 trials. We give the computer a range of alpha values from 0 to 1, say at 1/10 increments. And we have them do 100 trials. And for each alpha, we have them do 100 trials, say 1,000 times. So then we have this huge range of outcomes the computer is generating. Then we use the log likelihood, the probability that one of these series is going to be closest to human choices. Now it may not match exactly, but it's going to give a great probability of selecting that. And we subtract those, and then we find out, okay, for this one it was alpha of 0.5. So now we know something about the cognitive process of this particular human, and you can match this to every one of your subjects and find out their individual parameter. So like I said, we had our human before looking at his choices and updating his values based on the choices he made. But what if he also gets to find out the other choice, the option not taken? It does also update, but it updates in a slightly different way. It's a very similar equation. Again, we have our difference between the expected and the actual outcome, modulated by the learning rate that you see highlighted there, and added to the the current value to get a new value. But now we also have this alternative reality discount, and that's represented by this parameter delta. And what that does is it says, this didn't actually happen to me, so I find it slightly less important. Now, it might be a value of 1. Somebody might be able to say, I can treat this other world exactly as if it happened to me. This information is just as good as the information that happened to me. But what that delta represents is between these two equations, when we put them into a hybrid model, first one that just has the learning rate, and this one with the delta, then the delta represents the relative strength that a person gives to these two types of learning. So remember, we have one type of learning where there's just we only know what we did, what we played. And then the other type where we also find out the other outcome in an alternative world. And appropriately, given these two slot machines, the way that my experiment starts out is that you give people 2 wheels. For some people, this is a priming task. This is a big one-shot. People can win up to 18 euros. This number's a little bit small. They can win 18 euros. They can lose up to 16 euros. It's a big amount. For anybody who's run experiments here, you know that that's a lot of money in one shot. It takes all of 10 seconds to happen. They've practiced this before for no money. Then they play this, and it's a lot of money. Some people see just the arrow that they choose. Spins around, and then they get their result. They don't know what happened in the other one. Okay. Then others, we prime with the full, complete feedback, so they get to see both arrows. They get to see both what they chose, the result of what they chose, and the alternative reality they didn't choose. And you'll remember from the very beginning that this corresponds to disappointment, and then when we can see that we could have made a different choice, our own agency has something to do with it. Then they immediately play this strategic card game, and they're playing against a learning computer algorithm that is responding to their choices. It's a little complicated, but I think I can do it pretty quickly. Basically, in this portion of the game, the person can choose to invest up to 4 cards. So they have 5 choices: 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Or rather, just 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Those are the 5 choices. The computer, their opponent, can invest up to 5. So he has 6 choices. Whoever invests more wins this prize at the bottom. And if you invest, you win 10 cards. If you invest less than your total amount, then you get to keep whatever you didn't invest. With green cards where the human player is winning, he still lost. He didn't beat the computer, but he keep 2. But if the computer, for some reason, played only 1, then our player would win, and he would keep the amount that he invested. So what you can see here is that not only is there a way to win when you're in this weak state, but you also, even if you're in a strong state, or even if you think you're going to win, there's utility in trying to maximize your outcome by trying to play only as much as you need to win. So when you lose, you can also think about the other options that you might have taken that would have allowed you to win. So, for example, here, the player played 2, the computer played 3, and he thinks about these alternative worlds where he has a couple of other options, such as if he had played 0, he would have kept 4, all 4 cards. Or if he had played 4, then he would have lost his entire investment, but he would have won 10. And so you can see that you have these, you could just look at the outcome of the play, the result, and just consider that one alone. And that would be much more like disappointment, simple reinforcement. But if he starts considering these other outcomes that he didn't take, these alternative realities, then he's utilizing more of this other type of learning represented by the delta. What we think is because people are primed with those people primed with regret are already imagining this alternative reality, they want to engage more in that more sophisticated alternative reality type learning. So this is the central question is, are the people primed with each of these types guided by the more recent outcomes or by imagining other realities? Imagination slide. And that's the way that we measure that, again, is by using this modeling process and getting this parameter delta that then gives us a very clear idea of where they fall along this range. So this is the stage that I'm at now. I've gathered data from about 200 subjects and trying to get their data to work in this model and find out. So thanks very much for listening, and here for your questions. Any questions? Yeah.
First of all, so you described this study alpha for the sort of learning variable. Assuming this has been tested in large populations, what kind of variability do you see in that value, that 2% individuals?
I don't know. I mean, and I don't know at all for my experiment. I haven't measured that at all yet. In general, I know that it ranges from 0 to 1, but I don't know. I think that range can be pretty linear, or evenly distributed. I don't think it's normal, but I'm not sure. Sorry, I should have repeated that question. Dan asked about the variability of alpha, and I said I didn't know. Sorry. Anything else?
So the model of decisions usually is opportunity costs is notoriously bad, right? So that people are not very good at being aware of these opportunity costs of their actions.
The difference between what they predicted and what they, okay.
The alternative world, they didn't make that choice. They made a choice and there was a cost to that choice. Other things that happened. So the basic idea then is that you're priming them with this regret sort of environment then to be aware of these opportunity costs, right?
Well, so Clayton's asking about the difference between the predicted and the actual outcome, and that people are generally pretty bad about being aware of that, and asking if the priming is supposed to engage them in that. It's not so much the difference between the predicted and the actual, because in regular reinforcement learning, we see that a lot, like people argue about that, and even the literature on brain imaging shows that it's encoded pretty clearly. What this looks at, the counterfactual, the alternative reality, belief-based learning, we call it, that's getting people to think about the options that they didn't take. They do it anyway, probably, even without the priming. It's just that within that, generally that is encouraged within the same task. And what we want to see is can it go to another, do we get people to do it more so if we've already asked them to do it in this one task. If we just gave them the patent race task, the card game, which is what they did in the paper that we based this on, then there's a range. Yeah, some people do totally just regular reinforcement learning, like only recent outcome, and then some people go all the way to using completely counterfactual alternative reality learning. So it doesn't take much to get them to do it.
But what does it mean? What does it mean that, I mean, you're making it, but what does it mean for our sort of broader example of humanity?
The idea would be that you don't have to learn things specifically within a task. You don't learn every task anew or learn how to think about every task anew. Maybe that's obvious, but this would show, hopefully, at a neuronal level, how that happens eventually. That already, like confronted with a brand new task, we're already ready to consider it in this fairly sophisticated way. He was asking about the broad applications. I feel like I'm talking to yeah.
I can't help but wonder if before you do your experiment, I'm not very knowledgeable with this. Do you don't have any idea if people are high risk takers, low risk takers? There's many regulations that have their sex.
You're just asking about some other things like risk taking or sex.
Yeah, no, and professors that may happen at the end of your game.
Yeah,
if high risk taking could be one. And the other question is, can you with this kind of experiment actually tell something via alpha and delta about the potential of someone to be a high risk taker or a high risk gambler? And
so the question is if the parameters that we get from this model would tell us something about risk taking or other behaviors. Not really, probably not. Those aspects would be incorporated into it, but we control for those by giving them questionnaires. Like it's a whole, they spend more time on questionnaires in this task than they do on the actual task, is what I would say. But we're controlling for things like counterfactual thinking, like how much they actually think about other worlds. We're thinking control for risk using this widely used questionnaire about basically giving them a bunch of lotteries that they have to choose. And it's, I won't get into that, but yeah, we give them several questionnaires to try to control for this, so that we can see if there's an effect of like high or low risk takers.
So in other words, controlling funds.
Sorry.
You're not the task control for
Yeah, the lotteries I'm talking about, they're not actually wheels. It's like a choice between two different percentages for different values, and I shouldn't even try to explain it, but it's not wheels. It's just like sort of thought processing. There's a spectrum that people can choose from, and if you've got reasonably good subjects, they sort of switch at a certain point, and that tells you their risk preference.
How many more subjects do you need before you finish?
Well, it's the first big study I've run, so there have been a couple mistakes, but hopefully from today I'll do my last sessions, and that will be, I think I need 26 more people, and then I've got evenness in all the categories. There's several categories. There's the disappointment and regret, but there's also satisfaction and relief, which would be positive correspondence of those, and then there's controls that have no priming. So there are a lot of people, and you need a lot of subjects to get a good result for the model. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Thanks.
Again, it was a bit fast.
Yeah, I had my watch telling me the time, and I knew that I only had 2 minutes left, so I had to go in. But yeah, with a little more practice, I could probably